sucker. I would really like to know why people have to do the wrong thing. Why they gotta lie, you know? You can get ahead by being honest and good. But people choose not to do that. I don't know why. You know? Seems like a much more straightforward approach. You don't get caught in your lies. Past doesn't catch up to you. You don't wind up burning in hell if that's how it works. You don't wind up doing that forever. You know, like seems like there's a lot of benefits to it. But, you know, I'm a wingnut, so no one should listen to me. I don't think that disclaimer works though. You know what I mean? Like even if I say, "Oh, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about." Doesn't matter. I'm still held accountable by the YouTube ban hammer, so can't duck that one.
Someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
This is my mission for the last 3 years before running for president. This is what I did, okay, is fight this stuff. Their own money is invested in funds managed by these passive fund managers, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, that are using that capital to vote for policies and advocate for policies in corporate America's boardrooms that most Americans, including the owners of capital, do not agree with, and which do not advance their best financial interests.
And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Just as an aside, we've already done an episode of BlackRock on the PBD podcast. We broke all this stuff down. They have $10 trillion under management. They've had an investment AI called Aladdin that's been running since around 2003. This AI decided how to spend the bailout money in 2008. This AI has been so successful that it's been widely adopted, and it's part of the reason that so many banks have the same distribution of balance sheets. And part of the reason that corporate banking and corporate debt is having default issues, and they're losing money in their bond investments because they were planning on low interest rates for the next 2 years, and 6 months after that announcement, rates started going up and their investments tanked overnight. So BlackRock has $10 trillion on the books, but if you add leverage and derivatives, you probably could multiply that number by 10. But that's not officially reported, so you just have to speculate on that. But the market is highly leveraged, so real money is not the only money in the market. People are gambling on top of real money.
You say this is the most important election in decades, and that's a line we hear often during election season.
Maybe you have a little more insight. I can't figure out who the deep state is.
It is not one person. The model of there being one puppet master individually saying that I'm pulling the strings, it's the wrong mental model.
And despite the deep state's repeatedly attempts to stop me, I stand before you as a duly elected member of the United States Congress and tell you that a deep state exists and is perhaps the strongest covert weapon the left has against the American people.
Nobody is driving this car. The motor's on and nobody's behind the wheel. You know, we just saw Mitch McConnell totally space out or have a stroke or whatever happened. I mean, then we saw, a day or two later, we saw Feinstein, didn't even read the notes. We've got Biden, who can't figure out how to put a sentence together.
Do we trust we the people to sort out our differences through free speech and open debate? And I think that elevates what this election, including this GOP primary, is all about. Do you stand on the side of incremental reform within those existing institutions, in which case you should probably go with somebody else? Or do you stand for revolution? We have 3 branches of government. It's actually pretty simple. It's enshrined in a readable document cover to cover. I do it from time to time. The US Constitution. Something that we've forgotten, maybe needs to be taught in high school. I personally think every high school student should have to pass the same civics test that an immigrant has to pass in order to become a citizen of this country.
I know you're also an avid 2A
Yes.
guy, correct? If we amend this and we make it term limits, doesn't that open it up to amend everything? Is it an entity of individuals that are all conspiring together, or is it totally decompartmentalized?
It's the nature of the beast itself is not comprised of one human being with an intention. It is the machine, the Leviathan itself, that goes beyond a human individual.
In terms of conspiracy theory content generally, our goal is to promote authoritative content to our users.
Our goal is to promote authoritative content to our users.
Well, we the technocrats can't do it, but we'll have a meeting with you if you're a social media company. And we'll tell you that, hey, you know, the guy who used to work for me now worked in the private sector. That's the place I'm going to work later on as well. So we already have a friendly peer-like relationship.
As we want to provide users with authoritative, trustworthy information.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I only have a minute and a half, and I don't really need to hear what you're trying to provide. I want to know how you're dealing with all these conspiracy theorists on your platform.
The AI itself now spots.
Look at all of our stories. Look at the movies about political conspiracies. Look at the movies that deal with betrayal. Look at the movies like Terminator that talk about what happens when you get AI fully developed. These stories are meant to be warnings and illustrations of how things can go wrong so easily. I think it was Reagan who said, "We are always one generation Ronald Reagan, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for." And that's where we're at now. We're not being good stewards of the freedoms that we've been afforded by those who fought multiple times in order to preserve them. And we really need to take personal action, whether that's action with your pocketbook, whether that's just joining the conversation, putting your voice up, whether that's starting a channel and putting videos up. It's no longer enough to sit and quietly say, "Oh man, this is terrible." The opportunity to save America and the future of the children, the next generation of Americans. This is the time, if you care. This is the time to involve yourself in any way that you can, whether it's using your voice or your money, either one. If you start with the corporations, they're the ones that are funding this whole thing. And if there is a deep state, as he's alleging, the deep state is not poor people. The deep state is not government officials. The deep state is big money individuals and corporations that are involved in sedition.
American flags that are on someone's profile. So if you're somebody who has an American flag in your social media profile, the algorithms are already trained to pay greater scrutiny to what you say.
Are you serious?
I'm not joking about this. And it's not a human being that made that judgment.
We're introducing boxes that provide factual information at the top of results that have shown themselves to turn up a lot of information that is counterfactual.
These are the kinds of people who need to actually...
Counterfactual, misinformation, conspiracy. These are advertising buzzwords that are being used to politely describe your speech as being unacceptable. It's okay to question authority. That is what the country is founded on. Private corporations are hijacking your rights and claiming that it's legal because private businesses are allowed to refuse service or any number of things. If they don't like you, they don't have to do business with you. But the reality is that these places have become the town square. How many people are having important conversations in person? Most of the important communication is done through these platforms. They were developed for this purpose. They were sold to us for this purpose. And now the rug is being yanked out from underneath us now that we're already on them and there's been mass adoption. They entreated us in. You know, the mouse dies in the trap because it doesn't understand why the cheese is free. Do you understand why the cheese is free now?
be silenced and suppressed. It's a dirty little secret in Silicon Valley. It's a machine that we're up against. If we think it's individual, person-to-person combat, we found the bad guys. We walked into the globalist cabal, and here we got them.
Hinton has expressed concerns about AI's potential for replacing workers, and especially as a tool for spreading misinformation. Google praised Hinton for his contributions and said it remains committed to a responsible approach to AI.
Shawn, Vivek, we the people, as individuals, cannot be trusted. It has to be decided in the back of palace halls by the enlightened elite.
How are you going to find the right people to surround yourself with when you get in there? I mean, yeah, we know Trump had a hell of a time with that.
One thing I'm trying to do in this process is I'll just lift the curtain.
This is the most important election of our lifetime.
Look, this is the most important election, certainly in my lifetime.
I mean, what is even going on here? Is this just
They refuse to tell us. What we have today going on in the United States of America is a modern 1775 moment.
I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but you listen to Pink Floyd, Welcome to the Machine. It's a perfect description of what you're born into. You arrive, and this machine has been churning away for a very, very long time. The oldest Homo sapien remains are 300,000 years old. And not a lot has changed. Human nature remains the same. Evolution has not occurred in a very, very long time inside of our species. We are on a physiological level, we are identical to the remains that we are finding. We are still governed by hormones, greed, emotion, fear, instinctual things that make us act in a very nasty way to each other. And it's a real shame. But you also can't deny that this is real. You can't live in delusion. You can't be cognitively dissonant and choose to ignore this any longer because you see how this is going. We've all been ignoring it, hoping that it was going to turn around, hoping that this would get to the point where it kind of sorted itself out. This is not going to turn around without involvement of Americans at the grassroots level. And this election only matters if we are giving a meaningful choice. And what I mean by that is no more choosing the lesser of two evils. If we're given that choice again, we just continue down the same path. No one wants to choose either candidate in a lot of cases. And I mean, it's not their fault. It's the system's fault. The system is putting them in the place. And then the system, even someone who I believe is not guilty of treason, sedition, any of these things, like Donald Trump, is just so polarizing that I'm not sure that just for the reasons of unity and bringing people back together, I don't think that he is capable of that, even though I agreed with a lot of things that he did. I think, this guy, if he's not full of it, I'm not fully educated on his background yet. I like what he's saying, and I like what Robert F. Kennedy is saying. I personally, at this point, would like to see a choice between RFK and this guy, and if that's the ticket, then I'm not sure it matters who wins, because both men have a sound mind and understand that there's rot, and reform needs to happen, and needs to happen soon, especially with the monetary system related to the elections with term limits. You've got geriatric, nursing home age people running this country into the ground. It was fine while they were doing an okay job, but if this is what we have to deal with as a result of them being in charge, then big changes need to be made. We need to demand big changes are made. We are their boss. We pay their bills. Nothing happens in this country without us. There's a few thousand of them. There's hundreds of millions of us. We're just disorganized, fighting with each other over nonsense, so they can have our way with us. But if we do organize and we stop just fighting over nothing, scraps, whatever they give us, let's fight over that. Well, there's not going to be much left. If we just keep accepting it and taking it on the chin, this is not going to end in a good way. It's better to stand up and create some positive change than let this get to the point where that option is no longer on the table.
I think here's my take on it. I think he believes what he's saying, right? I think he has gone out there. I think I'm legit. Look, he was a 14-year veteran of military and the National Reconnaissance Office, and I think he went out and he talked to enough people, and he believes it. I don't think he's out there like spinning a yarn and is worried that now he's gotten over his skis and he's said too many things, and now I don't know. I don't feel like it's tidy, and maybe the difference between us is I spent a lot of time with the government, and the government is sometimes can be really, really.
This guy's Mike Baker. He was a CIA officer. He is maybe got some good information, but he's also regarded as a shill by a lot of people, I think. He's not going to step outside the lines. Let me put it that way.
Dysfunctional. And it goes back to keeping a secret. The idea that they could have this what essentially is a covert action campaign, to spread disinformation about what they actually know, right? When the easier thing to do is just to have the program, if it's the U.S. government's, development of technology, right, and we're doing this, to have the program and just keep your yap shut about it, not go for a disinformation campaign, not try to muddy the waters by doing this, because in a sense, you're just creating more conversation around it. You're creating, now there's a little bit of a, movement within Congress to say we have to do this. Now we have to. So they're going to look perhaps for a misappropriation of funds, right? Because they're not going to pursue like the UAP issue necessarily, right? But they might be interested in pursuing misappropriation of funds. So if you're running a program if it didn't, again, going back to the idea that it's a U.S. government thing, if you're running a program, that's the last thing you want to do, is because you're doing this program to avoid government oversight. You're not going to create, this alternative narrative that, could generate the sort of publicity or the conversation, particularly up on Capitol Hill, that causes them to then start looking and saying, well, where is money being spent?
Right.
Right? Because there is a trail there, and that could
Right.
cause a problem. Yeah.
What are your instincts when you look at it? If I'm looking at it, I'm saying something's wrong. It seems like bullshit. What are your instincts?
Yeah, I think I would like to, I don't think we're going to get there. But my instinct is to say, how do we solve this, or how do we come to some sort of logical resolution, as opposed to saying what is it right off the bat. My instinct is to say, all right, if the all domain anomaly resolution office has 800 cases, then tell us what those 800 cases are. Let's work our way through them, or have a little bit more transparency about working through those cases. Again, you'll probably whittle them down, right, to... we were doing black files and we were going around talking to people about, various sightings and things. You're basically just crossing things off, going, okay, that was this, that was this, that was this. You find some pretty mundane answers, but you whittle it down to maybe one or two things that you can't explain, and then you can investigate those and say, okay, well, all right, let's dig further on these. But right now it's just like all over the map, and they've got so many cases, and they just kind of lump it all together. Are they doing that to obfuscate and create, this situation where it does seem like bullshit? And
they've been full of shit for how many years? I mean, the first supposed event was 1930s in Italy. They captured something. And then you had Roswell, and it's just been deny, muddy. And then this guy's acting like it's all good. Oh, this is all news to me, Just weather balloons up until recently, This is shocking, Give me a break. This might be a waste of time. We might just skip this.
But I think I'm not willing to shut the door on saying that those handful of those few sightings that where we do have technical data, we got video, we got radar lock, we got gun camera footage, whatever it may be, that can't be explained. I'm not willing to close the door and saying, well, it's is it, because who knows? Maybe China's doing the same thing. Oh, we're leading the hypersonic race right now. Great, but they've got another program, and they were responsible for the Tic Tac, right? So we have to pursue it. And if that leads us to the doorstep that says, oh, that's a U.S. government program and they've developed the technology, okay, fine. But I realize that, I'm not willing to close the door on saying it could be something else. It could be otherworldly, right? Because I just don't know.
It could be.
It could be. I just don't know.
There is
who knows?
That problem, the infinite nature of space, which seems to actually be getting bigger.
Yeah, there was a good way of putting it that my wife, who's a hell of a lot smarter than I am, tried to explain it to me, and I kept looking at it like this. But she had heard a program at one point where the person explained it like, okay, imagine how vast the ocean is, right? And how we've explored the ocean, but then you look at space and how immense it is, right, compared to the ocean, right?
Right.
The amount that we've explored in space, right, is equivalent to like a wine glass full of ocean water, right? So you take a wine glass full of ocean water, you look at it and you go, there's nothing there, right? There's all those life forms, there's all those fish in the sea. It's kind of like that. And then, you think about space and you think about what we know and what we don't know and how we imagine, like our limited capacity to imagine what life outside of Earth could look like.
Right.
So yeah.
But when you hear talk of like crashed retrieval programs.
Yeah. That keeps taking me back and is, to this whole idea of, if there was a crash retrieval and reverse engineering program like David Grush talked about and had been in existence for decades, somebody would have fucking opened their yap and talked about it. I think
other than Bob Lazar.
Other than Bob Lazar, and they would have had some better specifics, right? I mean, that's always the thing. It's always where it falls down. Well, I haven't seen it, but I talked to somebody who knows that it exists, right? And I think maybe it's because we're human, we're programmed to actually want physical evidence,
Yeah.
right? We want to actually see it before we believe it. But, you know, that really hasn't happened yet.
What's one of the things that's fascinating is the narrative has shifted so wildly from it's completely preposterous to credible people like David Fravor and Ryan Graves and all these different people that are talking about multiple sightings, things that completely defy our understanding of what a vehicle is capable of doing, hovering completely motionless in 120 knot winds, all the whole, you know, whatever that thing is, the cube inside a sphere that they keep seeing over and over again.
Right.
Like,
Almost hit one of the aircraft.
Yeah.
You know,
What the fuck is that?
Yeah. And then they land. So I think, you know, one of the good developments out of all of this, and one of the things that may eventually lead to transparency, right? Because it will provide an avenue for these sightings, whether it's commercial or military pilots, as an example, to report it. Right, and to be more, and for the government to take it, perhaps, you know, again, it depends on whether it's a big conspiracy or not, to investigate in a more logical manner and in a more detailed manner. So I think just, again, the sheer act that we're talking about it, which then takes me back to the idea that, you know, if you're running a secret program, you don't want people talking about it, so you're not going to muddy the waters with a false narrative if you don't have to.
Right.
You know, if your concern is that someone's getting close to the truth and you got to do, okay, then maybe so. But, you know.
Do you think it's also possible that there are patriots that do think that the American public deserves to know about this information and they have been sitting on it for a long time? That people like David Grush and all these various people that are coming out, and more apparently are wanting to come out.
Yeah. Well, interesting thing with Grush is, look, he said so during the hearing, right? He said, I can't talk about that. I can talk about it in a skiff, right? In a sensitive, secure environment. All right. Well, if I'm, you know, one of the people on that subcommittee, I'm going to say, you know what, to my staff, schedule, you know, a skiff meeting with Grush. Get him in here, and let's, you know, have him talk classified shit.
Right.
So that would be the next logical step in all of this.
Have they done that yet?
I don't know. I mean, it's, you know.
When he said...
Preliminary testimony from 6 whistleblowers already occurred prior to the televised hearing. So, yes, they have testified twice.
I could talk to you about it in a skiff. Have people taken him up on that?
Well, you know, you'd have to ask him. No, I wouldn't know.
Right, and they wouldn't tell anybody.
And they wouldn't tell him. And therein lies part of the problem, because if he sits there but if he sits in the skiff and continues to kind of say, well, like, you know, okay, I don't, you guys aren't clear to hear this, and I can't. All right. Then you got to start questioning, you know, what he's actually got or what he knows for sure, rather than just having this you know, witness interviews and sort of secondhand information. But I'm much more, I guess the point is, I'm much more interested in the direct sightings than witness interviews, right?
Right. And the thing about him is he's not really a witness, right? He hasn't had any personal encounters with anything.
Right.
He hasn't had personal encounter with a craft. He hasn't seen a retrieved craft. He hasn't seen the biological entities. These are all just programs that he's been made aware of that he felt like people needed to know about.
Yeah. And
that's the narrative.
And I, again, not to disparage anybody, right? I mean, look, he's, you know, if in fact, you know, somebody leaked his medical records, which it looks like, you know, did happen, right? Then that's pretty bullshit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody needs to figure out what the hell is happening.
Let's see
there.
this. The information from Grush, who said he was unable to discuss specifics on what he told the Pentagon's watchdog arm. Lawmakers want to sit down with the former official in a sensitive compartmented information facility, a SCIF, to get additional information from him. The group has been blocked, however, by officials that have informed them that Grush doesn't currently have security clearance to discuss the issues in a SCIF, according to Burchett. We think that we'll get there eventually. It's just frustrating. I'm ready to go, and the American public are ready to go, he said. Luna argued that the SCIF with Grush could help lawmakers better understand the type of legislation they need to write regarding UAPs. She said she supports legislation that would declassify information on the phenomenon. So there seems to be some issue of secrecy and what's possible to discuss or what's legal to discuss.
Well, but yeah, look, the government casts a very wide net when you're talking about classified information, right? The government has overclassified information for decades and decades, right? And you've got secret, top secret, you know, code word, you know, and they tend to just hoover everything up and classify it, right? And then it takes fucking forever, right, to go through that process of declassification, and because nobody wants to put their neck out at that point and say, yeah, let's declassify this, right? Once it's in that pot. But the question is, great, you're saying, you can talk about it in a skiff. Well, damn it, then that's the next. That's what the subcommittee should be doing. Right? That's their job, right? If they're curious, right, and if they're sincere about trying to get to the bottom of this, and that's theoretically their job, then they should. Because again, going back to the main thing, and people can say, well, why are you wasting your time on this? But you can always circle back to the top line, which is it's for national security purposes. We want to know what the hell's going on,
right?
And if so. Yeah, we'll see. I guess that's the question that should be thrown at Grush, or should be thrown at the subcommittee members.
I'm also shocked at how few people care. I feel like people are so overloaded with information today because of social media and because of the news cycle. People are so overloaded with information that this barely registered on people other than UFO nuts.
Yeah. I mean, there was a surprising amount, I thought, anyway, of sort of mainstream media coverage. It wasn't particularly deep, right? It just kind of covered, okay, it was a hearing. And I think they did it because, look, it's UFOs or UAPs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, they knew they'd get some clicks on it if they were putting it online or whatever. And they didn't pursue it, like has been any, I haven't seen any stories that talked about the follow-up with Grush. There were a couple of stories talking about the fact that perhaps his medical records were leaked, as a result.
And the medical records showed what? That he had some sort of a psychiatric condition? That he had an event or something like that?
PTSD, I think he, some suicidal depression issues.
Standard stuff with military veterans.
Yeah. He had done his time in Afghanistan, right? And so that doesn't, it means nothing, and except for the fact that it shouldn't be out there, right? Those records should be damn well private.
Well, not only that, isn't that what we want? Why don't you shut your little dinger off there, fella?
Is that me going
That's
off?
You. Yeah, that's why your phone rang,
too.
What the hell?
God,
you got to learn how to use that little switch on the side. But
thank you for my IT lesson.
Isn't that what you want from? I mean, that's the whole purpose of providing these services for veterans. That when they do have suicidal thoughts and they are struggling with PTSD, that they get help. I mean, the idea that they're shaming him and saying that his report is not credible because of this seems ridiculous.
Bullshit. Yeah.
It's totally bullshit.
Yeah, and he said he's come out since and said, look, I did seek help. I'm gonna.
Same playbook they've been using forever. They just they discredit you. They attack your personal record. They leak information. They love to do this. I mean, this is clearly an attempt to discredit him. Oh, whoops, how did your medical records get out there? Where did they come from? Someone went and got those and released them on purpose.
In a better place. And he was happy that people were talking about it. They should be talking about it. Look, we lose a shocking number of veterans to suicide, right? And it's disgusting that we don't, that the government doesn't work harder at this, right? And spend more effort. I know a couple of people who do amazingly good work at the VA in terms of counselors, right? They're not managers, they're not executives. They work with the veterans every day, right? And it's incredible what they do. But overall, as a government, our assistance, right, to veterans. I mean, you look at the number of homeless it's pathetic. And so when he talks about it, it's good that he's talking about it, right? I think that transparency helps, and he clearly views it that way too. And he said, look, I don't have any problem with discussing it, but we should be concerned by the fact that somehow his medical records were put out there. And then, some people will look at that and go, well, is that the government's effort to discredit him? Or is that somebody's effort to discredit him? I don't know why anybody else why would you do that?
This is Dave Rubin of the Rubin Report. Actually, it's the Rubin Report is sharing the clip. It's Marc Andreessen about what the some in the government want to do to crack down on open source software?
The open source movement does take hold. If people recognize this as being a real serious threat and start applying, just using whatever it is, whether it's Minds or the various open source social media networks, don't you think the government would somehow or another try to regulate that as well if they've already got control over Facebook and Twitter? And
well, that's the threat. So the threat always is that they're going to come in and do that, and that is what they're threatening to do. That there is energy in Washington by people trying to figure out how to regulate or ban open source. Having said that, banning open source, like interfering at that level, carries consequences with it. And so, and there are serious proposals from serious people to do what I'm about to describe. Do you run a software program on everybody's own computer, right? Watching everything that they do, because you have to make sure that they're not running software they're not supposed to be running. Do you have basically an agent built into everybody's chip so that it's not running, software that's not supposed to be running, right? And then what do you do when somebody's running unapproved software? Do you send somebody to their house to take their computer away?
Right, so I should have mentioned before the clip, the guy he's talking to there is an internet legend in his own right. That's Marc Andreessen, who is a billionaire tech guy who has done a gajillion sites. He did pass on locals, by the way, but that's okay.
Yeah, so this could be coming in the future. You've already got the TPM chip in the Windows 11 machines, so Microsoft is going the same route as Apple. Apple controls the hardware, the software, the back-end support, the repair ecosystem. They custom build computers. They get custom chips. They solder stuff onto their board. They make it so that you can't work on your PC. Now, conventionally, you could build a Frankenstein PC, just get a metal box and start buying components, and you can run any OS you want. Well, now you have to hack Windows in order to run it without a TPM chip for Windows 11. And this has been the case for Mac for a very long time. It's called a Hackintosh. And you basically have to install things at the root level that trick the PC into believing that it is a Mac computer. So you're putting fake signatures, and this is what you're going to have to do. It's not going to be it's not going to be open and available for you to play with. They want to close it off. They want to control. They don't want you to be able to build your own PC. They want you to have to buy from Microsoft. This is the longer term goal. Is the reason they want to lock it down. They're going to say is for your security, but that's how they always justify taking your freedoms away from you. And just like a fish, we bite the hook every time because we're not as smart as we think. We fall for it every time. This is Patrick Bet Davis, David, talking about who could be president, and then Jordan Peterson is after that.
When you talk about Tucker, what you were doing on the podcast space, he was doing on the mainstream space.
Yes.
Like, very interesting. Now, when you think about talent, I'm sure if Fox invites you and says, hey, Joe, we'd love to have you on a guest for a 10-minute segment like that, I'm not doing no 10-minute segment.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to be your style to go on Newsmax or Fox or CNN to give a 5-minute answer that you give. America doesn't want that anymore, right? And a lot of these guys that have these TV shows, for them to go from there to doing a podcast, they think it's easy. It's not for everybody. You're used to reading a teleprompter. Hey, so earlier today at 6 p.m., Devin Archer did this, right? But Tucker is comfortable there.
Right.
When he did the Iowa event with the Blaze, and he's up there interviewing everybody, boom. He goes after ISA. So, now that you know everything that you know, did you take the COVID vaccine, and how do you feel about the decision?
Right.
And he says, did you take any of the vaccine? No. Mike Pence, hey, so, now that you're this, what do you think about da-da-da-da-da? Well, I'm glad you're paying attention that I'm running. Yes, but how about this, right?
Yeah.
One by one by one by one. That is very scary. It's not a duplicatable skill set for a guy like him to do,
right.
Tucker. But the key is this guy going to get the itch? Because at the Turning Point USA event with Charlie Kirk, afterwards, I'm asking everybody, and I want to know, who stole the show? Like at UFC fights, the guy get, hey, $50 bonus you're going to give. Maybe it's not the main card, but it's someone that steals the show. Okay.
Right.
It was 60-40. Trump 60-40 Tucker.
Yeah.
So it's like Tucker's coming into, but the part that he's not doing right now is, which I think is going to work in his favor, he's not going in there saying, I'm not running this time around. You know, he comes out and says in 2028, and imagine if let's just say Trump wins and he runs 2028 and Trump's endorsing him. I mean, he could be in office for 8 years.
You're going to love this. I recently sat down with world-renowned psychologist and author Dr. Jordan Peterson. We talked about a number of things, including education versus indoctrination and his mission to fight the far-left woke agenda in schools, maybe your school, as well as why Gen Zs can't cut it in the workforce. Not all of you, but some of you, and how we can help them. You got a new study showing new 2023 hires are unprepared for work, they're unprepared for life. Dr. Peterson's take on all of this, especially for parents, is fascinating. Watch. When this study popped up, we thought, you got to weigh in on this. They say that Gen Zers come in, they're sincere, but if they have no necessary instinct on what to do next, find them a lot sitting idly by waiting for instructions on what to do next. Does that make sense to you? Something about this generation that would have trouble being self-motivated?
Well, I think that if you set up an education system that's designed to do nothing but demoralize young people and to convince them that their ambition is dangerous and, well, even world-threatening for that matter, a manifestation of patriarchal oppression on the social front, and then a danger to the survival of the planet on the natural front, then, and you don't do anything to foster that ambition and to channel it into a manner that might be productive and to tell young people why their ambition might be useful, then you're going to get exactly that. So you hit what you aim at if you try hard enough, and the education system has been trying to demoralize people for 60 years. One of the things that really stuns me, you know, I haven't been able to figure this out yet. I've been trying to talk to Republican governors about this. I cannot understand why conservatives have been daft enough to allow the faculties of education to retain their hammerlock on teacher certification for the last 60 years. It's insane.
You mean the criteria to get the certification and what's
exactly.
in it?
You have to be trained in a faculty of education to become a teacher. Why? They're the most woke element of the entire rotten university carcass, and they have the hammerlock on 50% of the state budgets. You know, the conservatives are always complaining about the culture war. It's like, well, you handed all the young people to the faculties of education, right? Their research is terrible. It's low rate. Their students are generally very incompetent, comparatively speaking, on the academic front. You know, it's foolish, and this is the outcome. It's not surprising.
And it's a way to work on the foundation. And when you have an RNC chair or a DNC chair, if you have an agenda, that's what to work on. Don't get Mr. and Mrs. Candidate elected. Start focusing on the direction you want the country in, and find out how to give people an education that will allow them to at the very least think, but not what to think.
Well, the left-wingers in the 1960s were far-seeing enough, the more radical types, to envision a decades-long march through the institutions, right? And one of their goals was the capture of educational institutions, and that's happened completely, and that's been absolutely abetted by conservatives who tend to get lost in the details. And well, then you think now you have young people who are demoralized and directionless. Well, they're never taught anything about how to acquire a direction. You know, we did a study. I used this program I developed called Future Authoring. We did a study where we had 3 studies, actually, where we had university students sit down essentially for 90 minutes. Right. 90 minutes, this was it. And write out a goal, a series of goals for their life, right? Who could they be in 5 years across 7 important dimensions of their life? And where might they be that would be terrible if they didn't get their act together? We dropped their dropout rate 50% and raised their grade point average by 35%, 3 separate studies. So that's all you have to do if you want to motivate young people, is to teach them a bit of visionary discipline and encourage it. And we do the opposite of that. Plus, we terrify them. Trigger warnings. We tell them that everything's dangerous.
You talked about accommodation. So someone has ADD, they're told. Dyslexia or other things. Yeah. In the public school now, there's a lot of accommodations. I'm going to give you more time for your test. Yeah. Or things to that nature. I have trouble tracking across a line. You think accommodations in many cases don't show progress, can be limiting. Why?
Well, the problem with the accommodation hypothesis is something like, the advantage is, well,
This happens all across many different, if you're told that you're disadvantaged and you're susceptible to believing that, then you believe it for life. If you're told that you will never amount to the potential that your classmates will, or anything like that, and you don't have that presence of mind to say, who the f is this guy? You know, Conor McGregor. Who the f is this guy? I don't even know your name. Then you wind up believing it. You fall in a trap that isn't even real. And how do they know? You know, I mean, I've had people tell me that I was never going to amount to anything, and look at what I've become. You know what I mean? So take it with a grain of salt.
You want to do what you can to help people who might have obstacles that could be overcome to learn. That's not unreasonable. But the problem with the accommodation hypothesis is, well, what happens when you have an actual problem to solve? You're not going to be accommodated. You're not going to be accommodated in a workforce that requires genuine competition. Because if you're accommodated in a workforce that requires genuine competition, you're just going to be taken out. There's no time for that. Right. You might say, well, there should always be time. It's like, well, not if there are important things at stake. Yeah. Well, that's foolish, right? Because when you're making important decisions, you're always balancing one catastrophe against another. You don't have the option that everything's going to turn out. And so the problem with accommodation, well, first of all, it's going to be gamed, and it's being gamed like mad. And second, it gives the person who's being accommodated to the wrong picture of the world to which they're going to adapt. You think about this with parenthood. How should you treat your kids? Well, as a mother and father, you should be a proxy for the world. Maybe a slightly more merciful proxy. But basically, the message you send to your kids about their behavior is the same message that the world is going to send them. It should be. Because otherwise, you're not preparing them for the world. You know, so maybe your kid's annoying as hell to you and your wife, and you don't do anything about it because you think, well, we're all mercy. It's like, that's just fine until your kid has to make a friend or, you know, deal with an adult that's not you, in which case they're going to get slaughtered. There's nothing merciful about that. And if you accommodate people beyond what the environment itself would allow, you misinform them about the world they're going to inhabit. And plus, it can be gamed, and it's being gamed constantly.
Online school, you and your daughter working together. Yeah. What should we know, and how do we get it?
Well, we've got about 30 courses recorded so far in a studio in Miami. They look very good. They're very professionally produced. We're trying to find the best lecturers in the world, so if you think you're a good lecturer and you want to participate, give that some thought. That's Peterson Academy. We hope we'll be ready to roll in November. We want to make sure that we have the best lecturers that we can possibly provide on the most germane topics, and then we're going to ally that with a very stringent testing and accrediting system so that if you are a graduate of this particular institution, the people who hire you will know that you learned what you were aiming at learning and that you did the proper work. And that's extraordinarily important because employers need to know that.
Absolutely. Dr. Jordan Peterson, I know you had a few hurdles to clear to get here. I really appreciate your time. I know our audience does. Best success coming your direction. And, well, if you want to go see you in person, just go to
JordanBPeterson.com.
Dr. Peterson, thanks so much.
Hey, you bet.
The biggest master stroke that has been pulled is the capture of the educational institutions by leftists and Marxists. So there's more avowed Marxists in accredited institutions than there are avowed Republicans. And certainly, vastly outnumbering both are leftists, Democrats, liberals. So if you capture these moldable, impressionable children, you send their parents off to work, you demand that now it's a two-earner household is mandatory to survive and raise a child now. So you're offloading your parenting to the system. The government is raising your children. The government's teaching your children what they should and shouldn't do. And there's not really much you can do about it because you have to go to work. in a lot of cases. Not many people have someone in the household who can support the entire household and provide for a growing child or more than one. So, this is part of how we arrive at this situation. The thing that's crazy to me is I remember teenage angst and rebellion, and I don't know if they've managed to somehow get that out of children, but I mean, my generation was like, what are you asking us to do? Oh, we're going to do the opposite of that because, F the system. But that's one of the hopes that I have, is just the rebellion of the youth is going to reject this forceful indoctrination. But at the same time, it sounds like, man, if they're not prepared to work, if they're not prepared for this, they sound like they're not prepared to stand up and rebel. They sound like they've been taught to be obedient and unquestioning, and they somehow didn't learn social skills in school. I thought that was like a homeschooler problem, but I guess public schools now are like homeschools, so there's no point in sending your kid to socialize because it apparently isn't a thing. If they can't look people in the eyes and make change and talk to people confidently, then the education system, whether you're on the left or right and you believe that the political presence is correct, the education system is failing them if they're not prepared for work. If they're not prepared for the labor environment and they spent all this money, then there's no debate as to whether or not they've been failed. They've definitely been failed. They should have just gone into the workplace and skipped college altogether if going there gave them no legitimate preparation. So, anyway, guys, take care. I will see you again soon. I'm not suicidal. I would never kill myself.